Today's story is about a daughter-in-law suggesting returning the house given by her parents and selling the in-laws' house to buy a new house under her name. Later that the mother-in-law is now not saying anything outrageous. Let's take a look.
I am a woman in my early 40s, raising a child while working. No matter how much my husband and I share the child care responsibilities, it's obvious that the majority of the parenting falls on me as the mother. That's why my husband puts in more effort to do household chores than I do. Despite the salary gap, he believes that both work equally challenging. Seeing his attitude, I feel grateful. My mother-in-law has a negative mindset and seems to have lower intelligence. If her intention was to frustrate me with random and nonsensical remarks, then she must be quite clever. Nevertheless, I live my life giving back what she does to me. Even if I were to say unreasonable things and torment my mother-in-law, there would be no need to worry, as nobody takes her words seriously. From the beginning, my mother-in-law made it clear that she doesn't like me. I thought it was something inevitable. But she often says things that don't make any sense. It's really strange. When she says nonsensical things, my husband rarely intervenes. However, if her words cause me distress, my husband stands up for me, gets angry at her, and fights for me. I am grateful to him for that. My in-laws are well off. They are considered upper middle class. When I was born, my father's business was struggling, and we lived in financial difficulty for a while. We struggled economically until I was in the early years of elementary school. However, around the time I was in 5th grade, my father succeeded in his business, and we started living comfortably. My parents even bought another apartment. During the peak of their business success, they often mentioned that they would give me a house when I get married. When I graduated from university, they transferred one apartment under my name. Since I started working, I have been paying the taxes and taking care of the rent on my own, as my parents advised me to handle it. When my husband and I got married, we combined our savings and took out a loan from the bank to buy a house for our newlywed life. We tried to be frugal in our household expenses, and the apartment under my name remained as a rental property. My husband and I saved money diligently while living together, and we planned to have a child a bit later. So we had our first child 3 years after getting married. Although we didn't receive anything from my in-laws, we intended to have a modest wedding. However, my mother-in-law brought up the topic of a wedding first. I got annoyed by her saying that we should receive what we're entitled to. So we decided not to have a wedding. The good intentions completely disappeared. At that time, my husband got really angry with my mother-in-law. He questioned why she demanded a house and wedding expenses when she gave us a house, and if she had any conscience. He argued with foam at his mouth. After marriage, my mother-in-law caused me a lot of stress by demanding constant phone calls, pressuring us to have a child quickly, and monitoring how well my husband was taking care of me, among other things. Since my husband stood up to my mother-in-law on my behalf, I didn't have much stress. Sometimes, my mother-in-law says things that make no sense, like, in the past, daughters-in-law used to serve their mothers-in-law. You have to make your parents upset deliberately to keep close relationship with the in-laws. Every time she says things like that, I thought to myself, oh, she is not normal. I shouldn't treat such a person as normal. My mother-in-law seems to have low intelligence and a scheming nature. After hearing the news of my pregnancy, she tried to give me more work. Fortunately, my husband stopped her, so I didn't end up doing the task she assigned. However, it still made me very angry. Since having a child, I haven't visited my in-laws' house much, using the excuse of taking care of the child. even though my mother-in-law frequently asked us to come. She eventually gave up because we didn't go. Before having a child, I didn't do much work when visiting my in-laws' house. My husband did most of the tasks, like setting the table and washing dishes, and I just helped him. After the child was born, I didn't do any work when visiting my in-laws' house. Last year, when I visited them after a long time, I heard my mother-in-law saying things that made no sense again. She suggested that we live together with my parents-in-law, since they're getting older. However, I couldn't understand why I, as the wife of the second son, should live with my parents-in-law. This was already questionable, but what my mother-in-law said next was even more absurd. She suggested that we evict the tenant from the apartment and live there together. Although it's a 3-bedroom apartment, it's still too small to accommodate them and my child. She proposed using the money from selling the apartment we currently live in to renovate the new apartment and move in together. So I asked her what would happen to our current house, and she said it would be given to my eldest brother-in-law. However, it's the house my parents-in-law gave us, so I asked why I should do such thing. She replied, "It's not a house you earned, it's a house your parents gave you." It felt like I was talking to someone with a mental illness. My husband started shouting and asking why she was saying such unreasonable things. I told my mother-in-law that if we give the house to my eldest brother-in-law, he should support his parents alone. But she said it's not possible because he is living alone. He is divorced, living with his 2 adult children. So I told her that we would return the apartment that my parents gave us to them. I suggested selling the house where my parents-in-law live, taking out the deposit money from the apartment we currently live in, and moving to a larger house to live with my parents-in-law. I also mentioned that if we live with my parents-in-law, my husband, doing the eldest's role, should receive at least 3 million won per month from his brother. My mother-in-law asked why we're returning the house to my parents. I replied that since it's a house my parents gave us, it's natural to return it to them. I asked her what's wrong with returning the house to my parents. She said, "If they gave it to you, it's yours. Why would it belong to your parents?" She had a blank expression on her face. And I told my husband that I would love to live with my in-laws. I said that my mother-in-law would help with household chores, take care of the children, and my father-in-law would provide financial support for us living together. I also suggested that when we find a new house, it should be registered under my name. I explained that as the daughter-in-law who came into this house and gave birth to the only grandchild, it is only reasonable for the house to be under my name. My husband agreed with me and supported the idea of registering the house under my name. Since then, my mother-in-law hasn't said anything. I told her that we could discuss it again when I transfer the house that my parents gave us, but my mother-in-law remained silent. A few days later, my mother-in-law called my husband and said that it's difficult to sell the apartment where her parents live. She suggested that we forget about the previous conversation. My husband asked her where she got that idea, since I had already decided to transfer the house back to my parents and was looking into the gift tax. My mother-in-law insisted that we should never return the house. My husband said that we must return the house to support our parents' retirement funds. He said, "Mom, you have brother and I have siblings. But my in-laws only have 1 daughter. They need retirement funds." After saying this, he hung up the phone. Since then, my mother-in-law has been careful with her words. It used to be frustrating and stressful when she would use illogical arguments. But now that it has stopped, I feel relieved. However, since last year, I have been saying strange things to my mother-in-law. I occasionally say things like, "These days, when parents reach their 60s, they transfer their assets to their children and enter nursing homes themselves. It's a tradition for parents to give their entire wealth to the daughter-in-law, who gave birth to their grandson. People hardly believe the things my mother-in-law says. When my mother-in-law hear things like these from me, her expression does shows frustration. Seeing this, I sometimes wonder if she doesn't have any mental issues. Some people might think that it's childish, but it seems to be the most effective method. When we were newlyweds, I would pretend to be sick a few days before visiting my in-laws. But now, if I say I'm going to my in-laws, I can see that my mother-in-law being scared.
When dealing with a crazy person, it seems going crazy with them is the best way. She is bold person. Impressing.